Welcome to Diary of a CIO, a podcast that I'm putting together to interview CIOs from across Australia. The purpose of this podcast is over the last 18 to 20 years, I've spent my time in the technology scene. There's a multitude of content online that covers all the technology transformation, agile transformations, digital transformations. I've found there's a gap in the market for understanding the mindsets of CIOs, understanding the purpose, what drives them, how they build teams, I suppose the culture behind building a successful IT function. So the purpose of this podcast is really to uncover what drives successful CIOs. I'm going to be interviewing a number of CIOs, experienced CIOs, as well as up and coming CIOs, and really digging into them as a person to understand, I suppose, the fundamentals, what motivates them, and I suppose the journey that took them to where they are today. My name's Sam Ebrahim, partner for technology at U&U Recruitment Partners in Sydney. And I'm really happy to say I'm joined today by Louise Runyard, who's a CIO of UNICEF. I first met Louise probably about a year and a half ago as part of the Women in Technology Leadership Program that we run at U&U. She's got a very strong commercial background in the corporate world, more recently moved into the CIO role at UNICEF, very strong purpose-driven organization. So with that in mind, I'd love to pass over to Lou to introduce herself a little bit further.
Thanks for having me. So I'm Lou Runyard, CIO at UNICEF Australia, but I've had a long history working in the technology. Generally, I've worked in financial services background, having now just made the move to not-for-profit, which I am very much enjoying. So I started my career at IBM Australia. I was fortunate enough to do 8 years there, started as a graduate, and I worked all over. So I had about 11 different roles at IBM Australia. 2 of those years I got to live in Amsterdam, working on a major transformation there, which was very exciting. And working also in our Asia Pacific hub based out of Sydney for some complex deals that we were working on. I moved to Westpac after about 8 years. I was looking for a bit of a change at that time, and so Westpac has been one of our major clients. So I think when I moved to Westpac, I actually knew so many more of the Westpac people there from our IBM days than many of my Westpac colleagues. And I worked in that space as an engagement manager. So that whole role was around being the face of technology to a particular part of the organization, which I just loved. It was exactly my dream job at the time. I got to work in their data and analytics space as well, which was fascinating. Very complex for a legacy technology footprint where you're trying to both deliver services today but also transform for the data future that's needed. From there, I went to an organisation called Lonsec, which does research and ratings of financial products for the financial advice industry, which was excellent. I did about 3 years working there. And then most recently, before joining UNICEF Australia, I was at Waddle, which was about 42 people, very small when you compare it to the 400,000 people who worked at IBM. I was their general manager of technology. We were a fintech platform in scale-up phase, so definitely not startup vibes, but was more in that scale-up phase. They'd just been purchased maybe a year prior by Xero, the cloud accounting group. So I've seen a lot. I've seen 400,000 at IBM, 40,000 people at Westpac, 40 people at Waddle. And I'm absolutely enjoying the experience going from enterprise to smaller organizations where you can have, I think your decisions as a technology leader are more impactful because you don't have to check 17 levels above.
And I suppose if I rein it back a little bit, when you started your career, did you wake up one day and had an epiphany, I want to become a CIO? Or what was the entry into the IT world and the journey that you've taken over the years? What kind of guided your focus or where that kind of journey went?
So I absolutely did not wake up thinking that I would be a CIO. My degree had absolutely nothing to do with technology. I was international business with economics and politics as my 2 majors. Still to this day cannot write a line of code, although I'm sure ChatGPT or Copilot could help me with that now if I really needed it. I woke up wanting to help people and to solve problems. And one of the best ways to do that is with technology. So I joined IBM as a grad and I was able to work my way into that space and understand how is it that we solve new and different and complex problems with technology. If I looked at CIO positions when I was in an enterprise, so IBM and Westpac in particular, it looked overwhelming and to be honest, it kind of looked like a punishment. It looked very, very hard. I think the sheer scale and complexity is overwhelming for many people. As I moved to smaller organizations, I worked at Lonsec for a number of years in the investment and advice industry, and at Waddle, which was owned by Xero, the cloud accounting group, smaller company again, and now at UNICEF. The sheer complexity aspect feels taken off the table, and what you can actually do is get to know people, get to know the business itself, all of its facets. How do you help and how do you solve those problems? So it is exciting now to me, and it's not at all a punishment.
And what advice would you give to people that are, I suppose, on the journey to IT leadership and like yourself aren't natural techies? How did you manage to, I suppose, achieve what you've achieved throughout the years without having that technology foundation to support that growth?
Yeah, I think there's an angle that I've used, which is we all bring complementary skill sets into a team. And there's a lot around being a CIO that doesn't require you to be doing the technical design and technical implementation work. The highest level skills that I find that make me successful or help me to be successful are people management, understanding the business and the organization itself. What are our strategies and how are we going about delivering those? It's boring things like budget management and resource planning and understanding projects and their delivery and how they're tracking to plan, etc., which most technical experts and technical architects have no interest in specifically understanding. Stakeholder management, a huge amount of it's communications. How do you communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it? So much of what we need to do in technology requires change from people, and getting them to read your email, turn up to your training sessions, whatever it might be, requires a hook of some kind. And so working on your communication skills in particular is something that I found valuable. Yeah,
it's a common trend that speaking to CIOs in my network and talking about their role and what they do, technology is always a very small part of it. And I think a lot of the CIOs talk about having to have some sort of accounting understanding because the budget's having really good softer skills, being able to engage with stakeholders, deal with difficult situations. The technology piece seems to be a very small part of what a CIO role does, as long as you've got the SMEs underneath you to, I suppose, support and alleviate that technology knowledge.
Absolutely. And I would feel if I went into an organization where I didn't have that support, that would make me uncomfortable because I need to lean on my team and their technical expertise to be able to bring forward that technical understanding for whatever that aspect might be. That said, I have been in technology for 15 years and I do understand a substantial amount. I just probably shouldn't be the one doing technical implementation. Could if I really needed to, but that's thankfully not the job that I've signed up for.
And just going back to what you were saying earlier about the journey into becoming a CIO and the technology arena was really about wanting to help people and using technology as a means to helping people. I suppose we've spoken offline around the driver behind that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I suppose the Ikagai fundamentals and how you've applied that to your professional life?
Yeah, so Ikagai, for those who don't know, is a Japanese framework for whole of life thinking, is how I understand it. Ikigai was one thing that was introduced to me by my business coach, who I had started working with about 3 or 4 years ago, when I was facing some questions around what I wanted to do with my life. At the time, I was in technology leadership and I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in technology or if I wanted to branch out into something else. And she encouraged me to use the Ikagai framework to think about my life in its fullest sense, right? Rather than just think about something in a work context. And for me, it was one of the most powerful activities that I think I've ever done in terms of understanding what do I want for my life? How can work be a part of contributing to that vision? Not being the center of it, but being able to understand how does work fit into the life that I'd like to be leading. And it gave me the confidence to continue pursuing down a technology pathway, because there was a part of me that wasn't sure if that would be the right journey. So Ikigai talks about 4 aspects. It's what are things that you love to do? What are you good at? What can you get paid to do? And what does the world need? And it doesn't need to be grandiose in the sense of I'm saving the world. It was what does my world need? What does my community need? What can I contribute? And I feel like in planning of life in years prior, I'd kind of nailed the 3 that was, well, here's what I love to do, here's what I'm good at, and definitely what can I get paid to do is a big consideration for all of us, as it should be. I wasn't open to it. I hadn't really thought about what does the world need? What could I be giving back? And so that opened, I suppose, my thinking and my mindset around I should be factoring this into life. And so for the first couple of years, it was, how do I do more to give back to, or at least, I suppose, raise awareness of like women in technology. At that time, I'd still been doing quite well. I wasn't a CIO by title, but I was in technology leadership positions. And I was one of the few around the table, in any table, as a woman in technology. So that's what I thought I could be doing to sort of understand how that fits in. And I was granted the opportunity to apply for and interview for the role at UNICEF Australia, and I think I I would not have been as open to it. I wouldn't have understood what an opportunity it was if I hadn't done this work to figure out what does my whole of life look like? What does Ikagai say I should be thinking and striving towards? And it was really impactful for me personally.
And was there, I suppose, the applying the Ikagai approach, is that something you woke up one morning and had a drastic change to, I suppose, everything you did? Was it something you kind of, I suppose, assessed over time and implemented slowly? I suppose, kind of giving some advice to maybe people out there in a similar position and looking to, I suppose, redefine their purpose?
Yeah, I think it was, so it's a process that you can do, and it takes a bit of time to map out what are the things that you love, what are you good at, what can you get paid to do. And for me, I did oscillate around what it is that I can give back. I was quite limited in what I was thinking at the time, and definitely being offered a position to work at a not-for-profit hadn't even crossed my path at that time. I wasn't familiar with those opportunities and what that would look like. But I did. I woke up, and for me, it became a lot around thinking about being intentional. So I would map out what it is that I want my life to look like, what are all these facets, and maybe 30% of that became about work in particular. Whereas roll back to Lou in her 20s, 70% of everything I did, if not more, was about work. How will this help me with my work? How will this help with career? And it was, I'll say, the center of my life. And what I've really enjoyed, probably maturing, but also with this Ikigai approach, is moving it out from being the center of my life and moving it into a really important part, but it's as important as friends and family and exercise and travel and hobbies and personal growth, etc. So putting it in a space where it is on par with other important things, but not the be all and end all. I think that for me really came about because of this Ikigai work and this intention of what do I want my life to look like and how do I make choices that fit with that pathway.
It's fascinating. I think the perception from most people is in order to further your career and become successful, like work has to be the center and the main focus of everything you do. So it's great to hear a story about somebody who's really, I suppose, taken a more holistic view of their entire purpose, leads a very full and life, and at the same time has shown like exceptional progression through their career, and in a place where they're incredibly happy working for an organisation like UNICEF and impacting and making a significant difference to people around the world and in terms of their everyday life. Is Ikigai something that you, I suppose, in terms of your leadership and I suppose your people underneath you and the people you work with, is it more of a self-centered approach, or is that something you apply to everyone around you, and I suppose try and empower those people to, I suppose, have the same journey that you go on as well?
So the activity, I think, is individual, but the learnings and the conversations that can flow from that, absolutely in a group and in a team context. So a lot of what I'll talk to my team about is what are their intentions, and how do we make sure that those intentions find, for example, we do annual performance goals, and as everyone does, every organisation does, right? And how do we bring those goals, how do we align those with things that they might be looking for from a whole of life planning? So it is something that I think, and I would encourage people to do individually, but bringing forward the insights and the learnings and the lessons would be really powerful for things like goal setting and things like priorities, what it is that they want to be working on individually, but also in a work context.
Okay. In terms of communication as well, I think that's a topic that a lot of people initially struggle to get their head around in terms of IT leadership. Is how do you communicate effectively? How do you adapt your communication style with different types of stakeholders? What's your, I suppose, high-level approach to communication just generally? And then I suppose we'll dig into a little bit more around communication styles for different areas of people in kind of interact with.
So my general sense is that most people don't like talking to technology people because they go off down deep rabbit holes and tangents with technical detail that the individual that you're speaking to has no interest in and doesn't really need to know. So a lot of what I'll try to do when I'm speaking or preparing a communication, even if it's written, is just go right up front. What is the thing that they need to know? And that is, what is the value that they'll get if they read on? So what is that hook so that they'll keep reading? Because inevitably, if we start with what we want them to do differently, and then at the end you say, oh, so you'll get this great outcome, absolutely nobody is getting down to the bottom of that comm or sitting through the meeting or finishing the conversation with me without scrolling on their phones. So I think I learnt that relatively early. It's definitely something I speak to my team about constantly in terms of how do we communicate. I've often described my role as IT marketing or IT evangelist because I would say at least 20 to 25% of my role at the moment is working through the communications of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I get some great feedback from the team on it as well, which is lovely across the UNICEF organisation. But very much being intentional around what is it that you need them to walk away with. Is that an action or is that just information? Getting a sense around if that person is interested in what you're saying. So very much read the room. I think sometimes I can cut something quite short if I can see that they don't have the time or attitude, time or interest, I suppose, in learning more about it. But there will be individuals who ask the why question. Oh, that's interesting. Why? And so understanding when to give them the next layer of detail if there is interest. 80% of the time there won't be that interest. So punchy comms.
And how do you talk about the hook? What advice would you give someone how do you identify what someone's hook is? If you've got a stakeholder, you don't know them too well, you might be new to a business, how do you identify what the hook might be for those individuals?
Yeah, I mean, particularly if you don't know if you don't know anything about that individual, it could be anchoring to organisational values. So we do a lot around safeguarding our organisation, and so the hook could be something like, "Would you like to continue safeguarding the organisation?" Read on, or something along these lines, where it's how do you start with what the outcome is, that is business-friendly language, nothing technical. Come to my LastPass training session is not going to grab anybody. It is how and why would you want to use this? Would you like to be part of safeguarding the organisation and our supporters?
Okay.
I'm sure they would.
And what about, I suppose, how do you categorize stakeholders? If you compare, say, a CFO to a direct report to chief marketing officer, I suppose the styles of those stakeholders are incredibly different. So how do you categorize how to engage with those sort of people?
Yeah, so generally it's around what level, so seniority is useful. That gives me a sense around what kind of time they might have available to speak to me on a particular topic, and what sort of distance from technology. So direct reports in technology can go a lot more deeper. Somebody who might work in, say, data and analytics function, a little bit more tolerance for understanding technical things. As you move out, less and less. So for me, it's a view around how much time do I think I have with this person, and then how can I be as intentional as possible with that time that I have, always starting with that hook. And if there is interest, there are lots of people who have a lot of interest in the specifics. They want to know how and why, being able to adapt in the moment to that feedback that you're getting, rather than just reading from the script that you might have prepared or the specific talking points. Be in the room, be present, understand, are you getting something back from this person, or are they looking at the door?
Would you, coming from the corporate world, the IBMs, the Westpacs, and now moving into UNICEF, how would you qualify or categorise the significant differences between the stakeholders from the corporate world to the more purpose-driven organisations like UNICEF?
Purpose-driven organisations are absolutely wonderful to work in, and I've found working at UNICEF that the appetite for learning and change in general, and wanting to do better and understand what good looks like, has been huge. I think that comes as an intrinsic part of who we are as a culture and potentially as an industry. Yep. For me, the experience in the enterprise world was far more governance driven. You will do this. You must turn up. You must read this policy, sign this off. Whereas that carrot stick vibe of you must, it makes it tricky to communicate in a way that's fun and playful and catchy and grabby, because the vibe is very different. I've had a lot more fun with communication being in UNICEF and being in smaller organisations like Waddle previously and Lonsec before that.
UNICEF, complex organisation, Westpac, complex organisation, but different types of complexity. Which environment do you think it's more challenging to inflict change and, I suppose, drive, whether it's cultural change or technology change or people change? Which environment do you think is more challenging?
I've personally found enterprise to be substantially harder to work within. There is so many competing and conflicting demands on everyone's time. That said, there absolutely is in a not-for-profit organisation as well. There's, you've got a huge mandate and you're trying to do amazing things for the world with not as many resources as you might have, and definitely smaller team sizes. For me, the difference has been that intrinsic motivation of people in the organisation and that real culture of wanting to do more, wanting to be better, wanting to understand how they can contribute towards, for example, safeguarding the organisation. That intrinsic who are we and what is our culture has been really powerful to work with for trying to affect change.
Okay. And moving on to the goals, which I think is an important part of any, whether you're a leader, whether you're, I suppose, at the start of your career, setting goals for yourself, I think is really, really important. Gives you something to aim before, drives, motivates you. What's your approach to setting goals for yourself throughout your career?
Yes, goals I have not been historically excellent with. I find them personally quite tricky. I know that when I suppose throughout all of my 20s, when I was at IBM, I had a lot of fantastic executives asking me, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want to be working on? And I found it one of the most challenging questions to answer. Where do I want to be? What does goal setting look like? Do this for 3 years and then I'll be here. Do this for 5 years and then I'll be there. It's a question that I still can't answer today. So I have found that whole planning structure quite tricky when it comes to work. I find it a lot easier when you look at work in the context of life. I can answer what do I want my life to look like very easily, and that has helped to shape what are the goals and what are the intentions for work. From a whole of work perspective, I've started to find a little rhythm with it. So, for example, I have started an MBA recently, and part of that was because I could see that perhaps in 10 years' time, I might be interested in some board positions. I think some of the experience that I could bring to bear, the expertise that I'll have, that I have now and that I will have by then, having worked in corporate and also not-for-profit, being a technology leader, but also understanding business, having completed an MBA, etc. So I roll forward 10 years, I've got a view, maybe I could do this, which means probably 5 years, I might need to have finished an MBA, which means my current goal is finish finance and accounting, which means my weekend goal is study for my exam in 2 weeks' time.
Exciting.
So I have started to work with this framework, but it doesn't feel natural for me personally.
And how would you deal with goals changing, slipping? I think having a 10-year kind of strategy, it's a long time. Things change, people change, circumstances change. How do you kind of reassess your goals on an ongoing basis to make sure that they're in line with what's happening in your life?
I do that regularly. I'm one of the few individuals from conversations that I've had that I struggle sometimes with commitment in that sense to a goal. So if I have committed to do something and then my life changes and it doesn't make sense for me anymore, I'm very comfortable just dropping it and not doing that thing. Whereas I know a lot of other people struggle with, I said that I would do it. I must suffer through whatever it is to get to the end. That's not me. I'm very comfortable just pulling back and saying, nope, doesn't fit where my life is now. With the particular example of the MBA, it would take, say, 3.5 years if I were to do it full time. I've given myself 7 years to finish it because there are very likely times where I will get sick of studying and I just want my life back for a little bit. And there will be times when perhaps I want to go on overseas holidays that don't kind of gel with the particular schedule of class for that particular term. So I will always bake in space to make sure that I have the greatest chance of finishing it. Because if I just said I will finish this in 3.5 years, the motivation and the incentives sort of override the actual value that I'm getting from doing something like this and committing the time and energy. If you're just doing it to get it done, it doesn't feel powerful. So making space in what I've committed to give me the greatest chance of actually getting to end of job is something that I would highly recommend everyone do.
Would you, talking about long-term goals there, quite a clear strategy in terms of what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it, and I suppose adapting the journey to get there. What about short-term goals, incremental changes that you might do every day, every week, every month? What does that look like for you?
We've done a piece of work recently in UNICEF around short-term goals, or UNICEF Australia about short-term goals for the team, right? Annual goals planning. And I brought forward a different way of looking at it, in line with how the organisation looks at it, but different to say how my team had previously experienced it. I think so often goals can just be deliver the project that we said we would do, right? It's like we've agreed 3 different projects we're delivering, tick, 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 those are the goals. For me, those aren't helpful goals. Those are project implementations and delivery. The kind of goals that I find most impactful kind of touch on a few different sort of core themes. So one of the examples that we as a team had come up with and that my team are kind of working on are things like we will be a stronger team and technology function in the organisation if we get to know everyone better at a more personal level. And so there's, I've signed up for one of the goals to say every month I'm going to catch up with 4 people who I don't know that well and have a informal chat with them or a coffee or a lunch and just get to know people more. And in that, I'll have stronger relationships. I'll understand more about the organisation, more about the people. People will feel more confident coming to me with feedback or thoughts or anyone in the team, etc. And so I think the way that I look at goals is a little from a different angle of just purist delivery. I think that these kinds of things will help achieve the goals and the specific projects, specific initiatives that we have as a team. But personally, what can we do is some of the more foundational elements.
And as a leader, what approach do you take in terms of changing the mindset of people in your team that maybe their goals might be tied into projects or something along those lines, and getting them, I suppose, a different way of thinking? How do you approach that situation?
There was not a lot of needing to convince anyone at that point. I think for a lot of people, we want goals that feel intrinsically motivating, and it is tricky to sign up for a goal to deliver a project that is outside of your direct control, right? So much of what technology does is support our organisation or any organisation to transform or improve. And there's a lot of other stakeholders who are involved in that. They have their own goals, their own commitments, their own plans. So quite often, if you're anchoring just to project delivery, so much is out of your control, and you get to the end of the year, you've not been able to tick off the project, and it can be challenging to look back and say, well, I haven't achieved the things. So creating goals that are in our own control is really powerful, or at least as much as is possible in our own control. And creating goals that are intrinsically motivating to understand sort of what is the bouncing ball between having stronger relationships and getting stuff done is quite powerful. So I think the dynamics and the conversations I had with my team, they were really on board with this approach.
Okay. And how do you keep yourself motivated if goals slip, if, as you said, you're reliant on other people, stakeholders that may impact your ability to deliver on your goals? How do you keep yourself motivated and keep yourself moving forward in those situations?
Absolutely. I think these things you look at quarterly or more often with management or your leader or whoever it is. And so often you're like, oh, I've done so many other things in my week and month and quarter, but I haven't done these ones in particular. I think there's power in making sure that when you are setting them, they are part of your day job. They are part of what it is, like a structure that you're putting together for your year. So you don't get to the checkpoint and look at it and say, I didn't make space for any of that. But if that happens, I think there's a reality that we're all just people trying to do the best work with what is on our plates at any one point in time. So often things pop up that are urgent but not important. And so that balance of understanding, do I absolutely need to work on this really urgent thing right now that's not that important, but is somebody else's poorly planned and now it's landed on my desk? Or do I need to do those things that I committed to as my goals, my organization's goals, and get those things delivered? I think in the moment, understanding your time management and your prioritization is really powerful to not necessarily get to a place where you're 6 months down the track and you've achieved none of your own things, but everybody else is, lined up and ready to go.
You talked a lot about time management and prioritization, which I think is a challenge for a lot of people, particularly when you're in a busy world, in a busy role, and when you get to the level of CIO, where ultimately the buck stops at you. Yeah. How do you, I suppose, create a good work-life balance? What's your approach to that?
I very much try to keep my working hours between the working hours. It's if anything were to go wrong or if it's absolutely critical, I will, of course, do things outside of those hours. But on a day-to-day, I will sort of start in the morning and I'll finish and I leave work at work. Within those work hours, though, very busy, back-to-backs generally. I would say I've started time boxing. So quite specifically putting an hour in my calendar to review this particular policy that I need to do or create the policy, because quite often I'm writing these policy documents now, or whatever it might be. So rather than just let the day happen to me, I will be quite structured, quite intentional with what are the things that I need to get done to be able to feel confident that I've achieved the best things in that particular day. That doesn't always happen. Quite often if you're in the office, people are coming at you left and right for help or support or whatever it might be. But as much as is possible, I will own my calendar so that I can achieve the things that I need to get done.
And is that in your current role at UNICEF? How would you compare that to the corporate world, the likes of IBM, where it's a global consultancy, Westpac, financial services, which are notorious for, I suppose, working longer hours than other industries?
Yeah, it was very hard. Yeah.
Very hard. How did you overcome that? Because I think there'll be people listening to this podcast that probably in similar situations and struggling to create those boundaries. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think part of that's that intentional life, right? When I was looking at particular roles for the last couple of years, working at smaller organizations with less complexity, company or organizations that have kind of working predominantly in my time zone. Obviously, UNICEF is a global organization, but a lot of the work that I do specifically is within my own time zone. And so there will be some late meetings, but not that many, thankfully, for me personally. So it was an intentional decision to land at a particular organization and in the last few organizations that doesn't have global time zones, because I'm not my best self at 9 p.m. at night. You're not getting the best out of me at all. IBM was a lot of early meetings, late meetings, and a very much a corporate culture of you just need to get it done. Whatever it is, you must get it done. And that was quite challenging. I was early in my career and we were working on some very large projects at the time. And so I did let that all get away from me really easily and had those early signs of, I suppose, burnout. Now we would call it burnout. And I think maybe at 24, 25, I let that happen. And it was a really powerful learning moment to say, well, I'm not going to let this happen again. This isn't that important. It feels that important when you're a bit younger and you're part of a bigger program, you're part of a large organization, people are calling for updates from across the world. But the reality is, for me personally, keeping something in its box is really powerful boundary to have. And so there will always be times when things come outside of that box, critical incidents, whatever it might be, but striving as much as possible to keep something inside its work box and not let it flow into, now all of my weekend is done writing policy documents or reviewing or replying to emails, etc.
And how did you get to that position of that box mentality? I mean, as you said, you started your career in very much a very different mindset, and you're in a good position now with that box mentality.
Yeah.
How do you create that mentality, and how do you create discipline to maintain it?
Yeah, I remember having this conversation with a lot of girlfriends, probably mid to late 20s. It was like, how do we just care less? How do we feel everything less? Because we were feeling it emotionally so high all the time. If something were to go not quite right at work, or this was late, or someone did something wrong, whatever it was, it felt so deeply important in that moment. And the reality is it absolutely wasn't. So part of that is maybe maturity. Part of that is seeing things that go wrong and the sky hasn't fallen. It's okay. For me personally, I had a particular program that went quite wrong, let's say, and it was the most powerful learning experience. I think until that time, it felt like a lot of things have been going well, gone quite right, and you don't learn generally when things are going swimmingly. So experiencing things not going to plan, understanding how you react, how you show up in those moments is powerful learning, and there's a lot of growth for me personally in those moments. But after that moment, I took everything a lot less personally, and I took it a lot less seriously in how it affected my emotions. So not that I think that everyone needs to have an absolute disaster at work to learn this, but finding a way to manage how you are connecting with the piece of work and what it is, how are you showing up, and learning to regulate your emotions in that context and keep it in its box. Is this more important than spending time with friends and family at a barbecue? Maybe it is. Probably it's not.
And how do you deal with people that maybe don't respect your boundaries, whether it be stakeholders, team members? If someone doesn't respect the boundaries that you've set,
yep.
How do you deal with those situations?
Yeah, I mean, if the situation doesn't require it, then it is worth a conversation. I think one thing I've spoken to my team across the last 10 years about frequently is just asking clarifying questions. Quite often we'll have somebody more senior ask a question and we just jump immediately, and nothing about that question being asked actually needed that response. It was just jitters and, oh my gosh, someone more senior has asked a question, or 3 levels up has asked. I will drop everything and answer it immediately. As I've since become one of the people who ask questions where people might jump, I think I will try to be quite clear around if something is urgent or not, or if there's a time frame I need it in or not. And I would encourage any other CIOs or any other C-suite, anybody in senior leadership positions, to be really clear. If you're asking a question, does it need to be immediately actioned, or do they have space? From somebody receiving that kind of push on a boundary, perhaps, ask that question. Do you need this immediately? Or if I give this to you Friday end of day, is that sufficient? 9 times out of 10, Friday's fine. But we don't ask that question. So rather than immediately feeling like your boundary has been pushed, just seek some more information and understand if it has been.
Yeah. I think for me, speaking to CIOs and leaders in the IT space, one of the biggest, I suppose, realignments of what's important to people probably was COVID. I think one of the positives that came out of COVID was the fact that work isn't the be all and end all. I think prior to COVID, people who worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week, they wore that with a badge of honor. Yep. And now it's, I think, the realignment in terms of like your family, your friends, your pets, like your health, your well-being, like yourself as a person is somewhat more important, or equally as important as your job. So I think the realignment in terms of those long hours and long weeks seem to be less so than was pre-COVID as well. Is that something you've experienced in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be fully guilty of that experience of saying, oh, I'm so busy, and and at the same time complaining about it, but wearing it like it is that badge of honor. Glad to be past that phase of life. That's not for me aspirational in any way. Now I'm thrilled to be able to walk out the door at 5:30 and be able to then go to probably a gym class, although I don't do that as often as I should do. But yeah, go and see friends, go for dinner, go walk my dog, whatever it is. Like that to me is a life well lived. And I turn up the next day a better version of myself than if I had just gone home and worked the whole time.
And what do you think the typical way to deal with stress? Bottle of wine, glass of wine, go for a massage. What do you do that's different? How do you manage your stress? How do you keep your mental health at a good level?
So I think this balance of like work being, call it 30% of life, is a really healthy way to start to think about that. So what are all the other things? In particular, and I'm not excellent at it yet, but I've been really focused around breath work.
Okay.
There's an amazing book called Breath by James Nestor, which is maybe it came out a couple of years ago. And I feel like we should all read that book and understand how powerful the breath work can be on genuinely moderating our nervous system and understanding how do we calm down physically in our body in stressful situations. So what I will try to do now, it doesn't always happen, but what I will try to do is breathe, really focus on slow breathing. Intentional breathing, there's a whole bunch of different patterns you can do depending on what you're kind of looking for from it. It gives me the time to try to respond rather than react to a situation. And I will say I have been guilty of doing quite a lot of reactions as opposed to just response to something. Breath work is something that's incredibly powerful and it's still on my list to master.
I was always taught at the beginning of my career, if something happens, your immediate response is never as good as a kind of a more measured response. So I was always taught, type an email up, walk away from your desk, come back half an hour later.
Yep. And
if you read the email, 99% of the time you would reassess kind of what you want to say, how you deal with that situation.
Yeah.
That breath work, is that through a dedicated meditation? Is that through, I suppose, throughout the working day? How do you apply that breath work to your everyday life?
Doesn't need to be through specifically sitting down and meditating. I also, meditation is a practice that I've been trying to work on. Haven't found the space for it as much as I should do, but it is equally super powerful to just stay grounded and not let everything and all the stresses run away with you. Breath work at any time. You can sit here doing good breath work now and trying not to speak too fast to you.
Good tactic. I saw Andy Huberman recently, and he talked a lot about non-sleep deep rest, which is something I've try to apply to my working day, and it does make a difference. I think having that separation between just having a really active, I suppose, body and mind and just taking yourself away, isolating yourself. I think if you do a lot of research, the likes of the Steve Jobs and the really successful people in the world, like Elon Musk, even Albert Einstein, if you watch videos of him, he would walk, stop, close his eyes and just stand still for 2 minutes and then carry on walking. So that's something I've kind of started to apply to my everyday life. And I would recommend people out there listen to what Andy Huberman says about that topic, because it is quite fascinating and something that I've started to apply. And I think breath work, which Lou is doing as well, does make a big difference to your everyday life. What do you do in terms of kind of what is Lou's kind of outside of work activities? I know you've got a dog. What else kind of like drives and motivates you?
Yeah, definitely the dog gets a lot of airtime in a lot of my life in general, including joining most of my meetings when I'm working from home. I bought the dog to be able to get outside more. I think as someone who was living alone and coming straight out of the back of COVID times, you really wanted a reason to get out and go and live life. I think having a little fur baby to look after was one of those things. I'm a very social person, so I have quite a rich network of friends who I spend a lot of time connecting with and trying to make time for and see and connect with. Could be face-to-face, could be at the beach, could be just phone calls, whatever it is. Family as well. I'm spending a fair bit of time on my MBA at the moment. I do some consulting on the side as well. So I have quite a complex calendar, I think, life calendar to be able to juggle. And that's why it's really helpful for me to work in an organisation that is supporting balanced in terms of work. I think it would be really challenging to work in an organisation that was expecting, the 7 till 7 or 7 till 9 p.m. sort of hours, as a lot of enterprises seemingly do want these days. Yeah,
it's quite an interesting topic at the moment. I think the New South Wales or Australian legislation around the right to switch off. What are your views on that? I think I know the answer, but what are your views in terms of a CIO's right or ability to switch off?
I think you should absolutely have the right to switch off. I think switch off and being completely uncontactable are different things. And so that would be something to work through. I would want to know if something had happened. I'd want to be contacted because I think that's my role and that's my responsibility. But that doesn't mean that until the phone rings, I shouldn't be able to switch off. And I think a lot of that is around self-discipline. So I will intentionally not check work emails over a weekend or in the evening because if something happens, I feel like they will contact me via a more immediate channel, let's say. And so not reaching for my phone, not scrolling through work emails, for example, or through Teams chats or whatever it might be is a practice that I have put in place to enable me to switch off.
And what about digital detox? Is that something your work is obviously intertwined with technology, but so is your everyday personal life? Everything we do these days, technology seems to be a key part of it.
Yeah.
Do you try and digital detox? What's your approach to that?
I have. I went on this amazing health retreat called Eden Health Retreat up in Queensland about 2 years ago, and it was a digital detox. It was also no alcohol, no sugar, no caffeine. It was everything, and it was an amazing 4 days. I would highly recommend anybody. Just turn off all of the things that are life's, the noises of everything just coming at you and going to like a safe, serene space and trying to just relax and decompress. I think outside of going somewhere where that's a service that they offer, it's really hard to achieve. The way that I contact my friends and my family, etc., is through my phone, and quite often making plans to go meet up, etc. So I do think it's tricky to entirely do that over a weekend. I will try not to have my phone out if I'm connecting with somebody. Like, well, phone's in a completely different room as we would like. But equally, if I'm out for dinner or drinks or if I'm at a friend's place, then phone's away.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's a skill that I've had to learn. This is hard for a lot of years. You just, the phone pings and you really want to understand who's contacted you or what it is. Turning off notifications in general, unless it's critical. Turn all of those things off. I used to have one of the smartwatches that I now don't wear because I don't need things in my face at all time telling me that there's something I should jump at. Just trains your nervous system to be jumpy at all times.
Yep. I think there's a lot of research out there around the benefits
huge.
Of just separating yourself from technology. And I'd recommend anyone who's listening or watching this podcast, just apply it to your everyday life in small snippets to start with. And I, for one, I love my dog and love taking my dog for a walk in the mornings.
Yep.
I leave my phone at home. So my phone doesn't come with me. And in the evenings or the afternoons, phone left at home. Just a bit of time to, I suppose, just have a bit of a mental refresh. And also at the same time, I was a big user of my phone when waking up in the morning and also trying to go to bed. And if I woke up in the middle of the night, I'd always check my phone to check the time. And next thing you know, you're kind of scrolling, looking at emails. So
it's tricky here.
Phone's outside the bedroom, different area. And that separation has definitely helped me in terms of mental refreshing, making sure that you can remain focused when you need to. And as you said, all the other noise that kind of comes with it.
Yeah.
You don't need that when you're walking your dog. You don't need that when you're trying to rest and kind of sleep at night and kind of in the mornings as well.
It's true. Although I use my dog walking time to listen to Andy Huberman and his, the Huberman podcast or Esther Perel or any other podcast that I listen to. So it is around what is working for you in that moment. So do I have the control to try not check my phone if there's a message that's come through while I'm listening to the podcast that I'm finding fascinating?
Perfect. Lou, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your time, really appreciate the insights you've given me, but also the listeners to this podcast. In terms of takeaways and learnings, I think we'll all agree you're very much a purpose-driven individual. So anyone listening to this podcast who's trying to understand what the next step in their career looks like and how work plays a part of it, take a step back, think about what drives you, what motivates you, not only work-wise, but in your personal life, what's important to you, reassess your journey, and set yourself some goals. These could be short-term goals, long-term goals, but make sure that you adapt to those over time. Make sure that you, I suppose, realize what's really, really important to you. Work isn't the be-all and end-all. It's obviously what pays the bills and drives and motivates us a lot of the time, but there's also a really important part of people's lives that isn't intertwined with work. So I think in terms of takeaways and, I suppose, learnings from today's podcast, that would probably be the key takeaway I'd suggest for the listeners of this. I'd also like to offer Lou an opportunity to maybe share learnings that she wished she could have provided to maybe younger Lou earlier in her career. So what's the kind of one key learning or lesson that you wish you knew a little bit earlier in your career?
Yeah, thank you. I would absolutely have loved my mid-20s self to be more thoughtful about human behavior and psychology rather than just thinking because it seems like a good idea, people should just do it. I remember working on a number of projects in my IBM days and it made absolute good sense what I wanted them to do differently, and I just put it there and thought, just do that now. And there was no change management planning. There was no communications plan around it. There was no thought about the impact on them and their individual days and what I was asking them to do, which was entirely flawed. And so what I think all technology leaders and actually all of us in general should do more time thinking about is change management as a discipline. And for me, the anchor to that is, psychology and human behavior. So I listen to a lot of podcasts now around understanding how and why humans tick. Andrew Huberman's a great one for that. Adam Grant, Jay Shetty, Esther Perel, Brené Brown in particular, some of the sort of top 5 big hitters who hopefully lots of people have already heard of. But whatever it is that you're trying to do, 95% of the time you're going to need humans involved in making it successful. And where we trip over the impact of nailing that in any kind of project plan or leadership moment, whatever it might be, I think we do ourselves a disservice. So the more that we can learn and understand the human behavior and the psychology side of it would be really impactful. I was actually tossing up if I would do an MBA or if I would do a psychology degree. I think about it as equal skill sets for a CIO or any technology leader or any leader to master. I
agree, 100%. I'm a big believer that the human side of technology is always pushed to the side and people focus way too much on the actual technology. 9 times out of 10, if a technology transformation doesn't work, it's generally not the technology, it's the change approach. 100%. So it's fascinating to hear that from you and really appreciate your time today. Thank you. Hope everyone enjoyed listening to the podcast. Please reach out to either myself or Lou to connect. More content will follow. And thank you for listening today. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.